It's hard to deny that we live in a world that's consumed by beauty and media, where the perception of women's bodies, particularly black women, is significantly influenced. And renowned figures like Beyonce, Serena Williams, Jennifer Lopez, and Kim Kardashian have risen to fame partly because of their mesmerizing beauty and alluring curves that continue to captivate media attention. But what if I told you that long before the Kardashians graced our screen, there lived a woman whose tale of body exploitation and objectification still resonates hauntingly in today's world? This is the tale of Sarah Baartman, who was exploited because of her buttocks. From her difficult struggles as a young South African to enduring a life of suffering and dehumanization because of her physique, we'll be exploring the painful legacy of her exploitation and how her story transcends through time to become a symbol of inspiration in today's world. So join us as we unravel the tragedy, resilience, and ultimately the quest for justice that brought Sarah Baartman back to her homeland after being objectified, even after her death for the past 2 centuries. Sarah Baartman was born in 1789 near the Gamtoos River in the Xhosa region of South Africa and belonged to the Khoi family. This was an indigenous group that traditionally herded cattle in the region. Though her exact birth name remains unknown, some believe it is Sarah, and she came to be known as Sartije, which is a Dutch diminutive meaning Little Sarah. Her surname Baartman was given to her by her masters, and it translates to bearded man in Dutch, carrying connotations of being uncivilized and savage. Tragedy struck early in Sarah's life when her mother passed away while she was still a toddler. Later, her father was killed by the San people while tending the cattle. As a result, Sarah spent her childhood and teenage years on Dutch European farms, where she underwent puberty rites and cherished a small tortoiseshell necklace, possibly belonging to her late mother. In the midst of her struggles, Sarah got married as a teenager. Her husband was also a member of the Khoi tribe and worked as a drummer. Before long, Sarah bore children, but sadly, the infant died shortly after birth. Her life also took a tragic turn when Dutch colonists killed her husband. During the 1800s, Sarah Baartman encountered a free Cape-born man of color and trader named Pieter Caesars. He managed to persuade her to relocate to Cape Town, which had recently fallen under British governance. While certain accounts state that she was convinced, it's more probable that Sarah was compelled to go, considering the prevailing circumstances during that period. While in Cape Town, Sarah spent 2 years working as a nursemaid for Peter and his family, and subsequently became a servant to a Dutchman. Although Sarah wasn't enslaved by law, her living conditions were far from favorable, and she experienced treatment akin to those who were enslaved. Following this, she secured a position within the household of Peter's brother, Hendrik Caesars. This household was situated outside of Cape Town in the region presently known as Woodstock. In the course of her stay in Hendrik's house, Sarah worked as a wet nurse, tending to the nursing needs of other women's children, which is a responsibility that is often undertaken by women in dire poverty. It was during this time that she became romantically involved with Hendrik van Zong, a poor Dutch soldier who resided nearby. However, their relationship was cut short as Zong's regiment left the city, leaving Sarah to grapple with yet another heartbreak. Sarah Baartman's journey from Africa to Europe was initiated by Alexander Dunlop, a British showman who also ran a medical practice. Dunlop was drawn to Sarah's distinctive physical attributes, especially her steatopedia condition, which caused her buttocks to become exceptionally large due to the accumulation of fat. In the early 19th century, this condition was exceptionally uncommon and captivated English audiences. Recognizing the potential for lucrative exhibition, Dunlop persuaded Sarah to travel to England and showcase her physique at circuses. At first, Sarah declined the offer, but Dunlop persisted, recognizing the potential for substantial profits. Over time, Sarah took into account her financial hardships and eventually agreed to the idea. However, she laid down a condition that she would only go if Hendrik Caesars, who equally had financial difficulties of his own, could accompany her. When Hendrik Caesars was approached with a proposal by Alexander Dunlop, he initially declined to join them on the journey. However, owing to his increasing debts and the non-payment by clients, Hendrik ultimately agreed and decided to accompany Sarah on her expedition. They proceeded to sign the contract, but since Sarah was unable to read English, she probably signed it without comprehending the contents. This vulnerability enabled the men to manipulate her further, and in 1810, Hendrik Caesars and Alexander Dunlop transported Sarah Baartman to London, settling in an affluent section of the city. The exhibition occurred at the Egyptian Hall in London, where the attendees paid to view her, as they were fascinated by her unfamiliar African heritage and her distinctive buttocks. She was marketed as the Haudenotte Venus, a moniker also used for another woman in 1829. This display of Sarah Baartman created a tumultuous situation, given that the slave trade had been abolished in 1807. Regrettably, she was mishandled and subjected to the treatment akin to that of a slave and an animal while on stage. This treatment prompted British abolitionists to champion her freedom and seek legal action on her behalf. However, Baartman retained that she willingly participated in the exhibition and was not subjected to mistreatment. As her popularity grew, she toured various regions of England and even visited Ireland. In 1811, she received baptism and likely got married in Manchester, although the absence of records makes this assertion unverifiable. Baartman's shows consistently drew substantial crowds, with spectators observing, touching, and even poking her body, especially her buttocks, as she performed on stage, often confined within a cage. She was objectified and made to perform native dances and play African instruments on stage. Her attire included skin-tight, flesh-colored clothing embellished with beads and feathers, as her flesh-colored silk sheath gave the impression of nudity. In a deeply degrading manner, wealthy patrons had the option of paying for private shows at their homes, with the guests allowed to touch her however they wanted. As this ill treatment came to light, the African Association, an abolitionist society, took the case to court. But Sarah claimed she came to London of her own free will, and the contract seemed to support the men's defense. The case was dismissed, and Sarah remained under Dunlop and Caesar's control. Following Dunlop's death in 1814, Sarah was bought to Paris by a man called Henry Taylor. She was later sold to a wild animal trader and showman named Sean Rowe, who subjected her to severe hardship and also raped her, which resulted in pregnancy. Their daughter, named Akura Rowe, was born, but tragically passed away at the age of 5. In France, she was exhibited almost naked, treated like a circus animal, and even had a collar placed around her neck. Despite being offered money, she refused to be presented fully naked and always insisted on wearing a small apron-like garment over her genitalia. She experienced multiple instances of molestation and was coerced into prostitution in Paris. Various records indicate that she also contracted an infection. Tragically, Sarah Baartman died in a penury in December 9, 1815, at the youthful age of 26. There are various theories surrounding the cause of her death, with some suggesting smallpox, while others claiming she contracted syphilis or pneumonia. After her death, scientist Georges Cuvier claimed ownership of her remains. He proceeded to create a plaster cast of her body before permitting the French anatomist Henri-Marie de Croix de Blainville to carry out the dissection. However, no autopsy was done to definitively establish the cause of her death. Cuvier preserved Baartman's brain, genitalia, and skeleton. He applied on behalf of the Muséum d'Histoire Naturelle to retain her remains, arguing that she represented a unique specimen of humanity and held special scientific interest. The application received approval, and Baartman's skeleton and body cast was displayed at Muséum d'Histoire Naturelle d'Angers. Her remains continued to attract public interest until they were moved to the Musée de l'Homme in 1937. The exhibit focused on her steagypedia and reinforced the objectification and degrading representation of women. In many African countries, Full-figured women were traditionally considered attractive, representing wealth, fertility, and good health. However, Western society promoted a thin body as the ideal, leading to dissatisfaction among those whose bodies didn't conform to the standard. During the 19th century, Europeans viewed Sarah Baartman's unique body features, characterized by full breasts, a narrow waist, and extra-large buttocks, as ugly. She was displayed against her will in Europe, and later exhibited even after her death in a Parisian museum. Ironically, her body may have inspired the creation of the Victorian bustle dress, which became popular from 1870 onwards. In recent times, the exploitation and fetishization of the black female body have drawn parallels to how Baartman was represented in the Hauntingly Venus in the 19th century. For instance, a controversial photo of Kim Kardashian balancing a champagne glass on her rear caused criticism for perpetuating similar stereotypes. Critics argue the objectification of Baartman's body in the 19th century and the ethnographic representation of her image resemble how Kardashian is currently portrayed in the media. However, some writers assert that Baartman had agency and performed on her own terms, refusing to be seen as a mere object of entertainment or scientific curiosity. Social scientists also observed that Baartman's historical representation played a role in shaping racist narratives surrounding African American tennis players like Venus and Serena Williams. Commentators fixated on their body's physical features and downplayed their on-court achievements, similar to how Baartman's body was sensationalized and objectified. With the African National Congress, ANC, achieving victory in the 1994 South African general election, President Nelson Mandela formally requested France to repatriate Sarah Baartman's remains. This move marked a significant step in the fight for justice and recognition of her dignity. However, the process was not without challenges. There were legal complications and debates in the French National Assembly regarding the repatriation request. Despite these hurdles, on the 6th of March 2002, France finally agreed to return Baartman's remains to her homeland. Her remains were repatriated to the Gamtoos Valley, her birthplace, on 6th of May 2002. She was then laid to rest on the 9th of August 2002 at Vergederingskap Hill in Hankie. This homecoming marked a significant moment for both South Africans and people worldwide who had advocated for her return. It was a significant event that took place over 200 years after Sarah Baartman's birth. Finally, she was laid to rest in her homeland, where she had longed to return, and where her tragic story of exploitation and objectification had started. Sarah Baartman's story holds significant meaning for Africans worldwide. Her legacy challenges harmful stereotypes and serves as a crucial reminder of the historical injustices faced by many, especially African women, and it inspires collective determination to seek justice and equality. Through her memory, Africans find motivation to celebrate their culture, embrace their identity, and strive for a future where every individual is treated with dignity and respect. Sarah Baartman's legacy lives on as a source of empowerment, encouraging Africans to stand united and work towards a brighter and more equitable tomorrow.